children, their children, their children. May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his presence go before you and behind you and beside you, all around you and within you. He is with you. He is with you in the morning, in the evening, in your coming and your going, in your weeping and rejoicing. He is for you. 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 He is for you.
Did you bring the dung beetle? That's not this call. Okay. Good evening. I know we'll have some others coming in, and that's perfectly fine, but we are automatically, we're going to start at 6 o'clock on live stream. And so those who are joining us on live stream, we want to welcome you as well. Tonight, we will have 2 sessions. There will be a 45-minute session and then a break, and then we'll do the second 45-minute session. These are being recorded and will be edited as part of the Servant School curriculum that will go out. Servant School is a ministry launched here at Christ Church with the expressed intention for training laity in biblical studies, theological and apologetics studies, in spiritual formation, in leadership and stewardship, and also in family wellness. And it is family wellness where it is in family wellness where our conversation is tonight. We have several ways through different courses that Servant School is able to and will be sharing and training for its mission to help laity be stronger in the Word. But we are hosting 3 times each year forums on issues that we believe cut across what it means to be a follower of Christ in what we call applied theology. To take the things we believe and the things that we say about what we believe, and actually how do you put those into practice. And I don't know of a more important place to put into practice than our relationships, what we say we believe. In fact, as Methodists, John Wesley was very much convinced that with all of the great knowledge there was, and in his day, preachers were very good about knowledge, he wanted to figure out how do you get heart to heart, was the way he would talk about it. How do you get into helping people be and live and follow Jesus in their everyday? Tonight, our speaker tonight is someone who is very qualified to talk about this. Ronnie Kent is a medical doctor. He was our girls' pediatrician, the first two anyway, when they came along. And in fact, they call him Uncle Ronnie, and they sent some video messages to you that you'll get a little bit later to say they couldn't be here tonight, but to say hello. He got to spend some time with Emily last night. But he is the founder, though, after 20-something years in pediatrics, 20 years in pediatrics. He founded Connections, and he is the medical director. Connections is a family and behavioral health center that has 24 practitioners now that are seeing families from all over, including some from Memphis, drive all the way to Hattiesburg, Mississippi. But he did this talk 25 years ago, and the way I know that the dating on it was because Sarah Grace was one year old at the time, and it has had more effect on how we've parented and how we have basically carried out the mission of our life and our family together than anything else that we've done. And we've done Myers-Briggs, and we've even done recently the Enneagram. But with all of that, it kind of goes back, and in fact, all of those go back to what we'll talk about tonight. But it's also important for me to introduce Ronnie because as an 11-year-old who showed up in the emergency room with a new, young, maybe 27-year-old pediatrician in town with a hemophiliac with a big old knot on his head, that's how I got to know Ronnie Kent. So he was my doctor for a while. I tell people he was my pediatrician, and they think he's really, really old. Yes, indeed, yes. But there's a little bit of a timing issue there. But the more important part of our journey started when, at the age of 16, he was the one who told me that I was HIV positive. My family had asked if he would do that, and I made an appointment with him and went to see him at his office, and he shared that with me. And just something clicked from that moment on, and we have been dear friends ever since. And so 35 years later, we are standing here, and so much of who I am today is because of him. And I can say that absolutely clearly. So you can blame him for any issue you may have. But I'm going to open us in prayer, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ronnie. Gracious Father, we thank you so much for your love and grace, and we thank you for a great day of worship. We thank you for letting us be in your presence. And Father, tonight as we come into this time together, we pray that you'll first be with Ronnie, that you will give him a sense of your presence and peace, allow him to share this information that he has now shared for so long in so many different ways and places, Lord, but that this will be just like the very first time, the kind of energy that your Spirit will fill and will entail. And Lord, I thank you for his family. I thank you for his wife, Ann, for his granddaughter, Mary Brooke, who are with him tonight. And Lord, I just ask that you will bless them as they travel. And Lord, I pray more than anything, though, that what will happen here tonight will open up streams of conversation for maybe looking not only within, but helping us to look at how we deal with each other, so that in the most important things of our life, the relationships of our lives, we may bring glory to you. We ask this and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. And Ann and Mary Brooke are over here. If y'all just wave your hand up in the room. There you go. All right, will you welcome Ronnie Kent, please?
Well, what a privilege it is to be here. Shay and I, he's told you a good bit of the story. We were kind of separated a little bit for 8 or 9 years, and then, as God would have it, about 2 years ago, I guess, we were reconnected. And I don't think that was by chance. I think there was a very providential reason for that. So I look forward to sharing with you tonight. You have to appreciate the fact that now, you've been used to Shane's preaching, and take this for what it's worth. We're a fair amount alike in a lot of ways, but now he's a preacher, okay? And I'm a teacher. And there's a big difference in the two of those, because preachers preach, and if you get something great, if you don't, that's okay with them. But teachers teach, and if you don't get something from me, I'm upset, okay? And so preachers don't particularly care. In fact, sometimes your participation during the sermon is a nuisance to them. But your participation with me is essential for me. So you're going to have to be with me, because, and as I'll tell you in just a minute, you'll also hurt my feelings if you don't do it. So let's just look at this knowing your child. And as anybody who presents knows, this is a little new situation for me. I tend to take up the whole platform, but
these gotta go.
Oh.
All this can be edited.
I thought they were actually coming to take me away. I wasn't really sure. Can I pull this one?
No, you keep going, we'll keep.
Oh, okay. So what we're going to talk about knowing your child, and of course, talking about temperaments is not the only way you will know your child, but this, I think, is one of those situations where to have this information at your disposal will cause you to take a different perspective as you deal with your children, both in the wonderful aspects of loving and caring for your child, but also in those times when you are not so sure that you married the right person because they got all of that person's genes. And so we're going to look at this as just one aspect of our parenting our children. So, but I first have to tell you about this. When I was about in the 8th grade, we decided, I was the only one left. I have an older sister who's 7.5 years older than me, so she had left, gone to college. And so my father, we didn't travel much, my father said, let's go to those Smoky Mountains. We've never been up there, so let's go to those Smoky Mountains. So we got in our Chevrolet Impala and we took off to go to the Smoky Mountains. And just about when we crossed over into Alabama, we started seeing the roofs of almost every barn in Alabama painted with what? See Ruby Falls, okay? So he said, I wonder what this Ruby Falls thing is. And the closer we got to Chattanooga, the more he see Ruby Falls. He said, we have got to see Ruby Falls. So the first thing, and of course, not only was there a cell phone or GPS, but we barely could find a place that had the maps, that you unfold. My mother was not the one to take directions from, so we'd have to stop and ask directions. So we finally made it to Ruby Falls. And so we go into this cave, and we're going downstairs into this cave, and, the guide is wonderful. She was just so enthusiastic about the whole thing, and we get down, and you squeeze through this cavern, and we get to the place where she says, and then here, Lambert, I think it's Leo Lambert, I think it's his name, the guy who discovered Ruby Falls. Leo Lambert was here, and he heard this sound, and he didn't know what it was. And all of a sudden, he turned his lantern on, and there was Ruby Falls. And the light came on, and it really kind of looked like somebody stuck a water hose up, and water was squirting out, because as you may not know, if it's dry weather, Ruby Falls doesn't really fall very well. And so we were standing, and there were 30 people there, and so she turns this on, and she says that, and there was a hush over the room. And my dad goes, is that all it is? Now, he has been talking about me for a long time, and I know that. So after tonight, I hope this is not a Ruby Falls experience for you, because I'm afraid he's painting my name on way too many ceilings. So I would hope you would be gracious with me and let us see this. But this is a great verse for me. As we talk about children and parenting and rearing children, then we look at two aspects of them. There's their nature, and then there's their nurture. And there's debate about which is more important. And I don't think you could really say one is actually more important than the other. But what we're going to really look at more tonight is the nature part of children. And I don't think there shouldn't be any question in anybody's mind when God, from this verse, when God actually starts dealing with a child or dealing with any of us. And that's when he starts, when those two cells come together and that's when God starts planning our future. Because look what he says. He says, you created my inmost beings. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. And so it's not by any degree of coincidence, I don't believe, that we are who we are, that your children are who they are, that your spouse is who they are, that your friends are who they are, that your people you work with, the people you come in contact with just anywhere on the street are who they are. So the more we can know about why and how God created them that way, I think the more we can, as Shane preached so eloquently today, that we can go into the world and make disciples. We can do what God called us to do. And so as we look at that aspect, then we go to one of the if you ask people, what's the parenting verse in the Bible, they're going to probably, at least at some point, come up with Proverbs 22:6. And I think there's something about this as you study it, there's something about it, and I am not a Hebrew, Greek, or any scholar, but I read a lot of folks that are. And so as you look at this verse, there's a very interesting thing, and I'm going to try to give you an illustration of this. But if there are any woodworkers out there, you might know that wood sometimes doesn't behave like it's supposed to, so hopefully my illustration will work the time I want it to. This verse says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it or turn from it. And really a way to look at that, if you really look at how some people interpret that, it's train up a child according to his way. And when he is old, he will not depart from it or turn from it. And if you look at that even more about train up a child according to his way, it's actually according to his bent. Okay, B-E-N-T. And if you look at, as I read, people say that as you look at that word, they actually say in just Hebrew literature that you make a bow, like for a bow and arrow, according to the bent of the tree. And so what bent does with wood, okay, is it causes, if you make that bow according to the bent of the tree, it's flexible. So when it is stressed, it comes back to the way it's supposed to be, okay? But if you make if you make a bow against the bent of the tree, which is this way, then when you stress it, let's see what this wood does. It breaks. And I believe what God's telling us in that is if we raise up our children according to the bent, according to the way God has made them, I think that when the world stresses them, because the world will stress them, when the world stresses them, they'll come back. But if we don't look at the way God has made those children, and we think that child is supposed to be like me, then sometimes that stress breaks them. So that's what this is all about. Our children are uniquely and wonderfully made, and if we think they're just little us's, that's going to surprise us and them, and it's going to cause that stress to do things that we don't want them to do. And then I really, this is really my life verse, and God gave me this freshman year in medical school when I was really, really questioning whether God was as wise as I thought he was, because he had allowed me to get into medical school, and I thought he was way too overconfident in my ability to do what he wanted me to do. Because I was real good I actually finished at Mississippi State in biological engineering and had a few biology courses. But when I got into medical school, oh my goodness, there were people in there talking. There's a dictionary just for medical terms, and I had to start highlighting those words because I kept looking at the same word over and over again because I was so ignorant of the medical language. And I sat down, I remember, on the floor, and my dad had given me a Living Bible because I was there when the Living Bible kind of came out. I am old. And this verse, God gave me this verse that in the Living Bible just literally leapt off the page to me. And Ann has crocheted it. I've got it all hanging all over my office, and because it means so much to me. And it says we, but I change it to I. I confidently and joyfully look forward to actually becoming all that God has had in mind for me to be. Okay? And, you know, in the NIV it says we exalt in the hope of the glory of God. And what that says to me, that I can and that I should be able to, the people around me, certainly starting with those people in my family, and that includes my spouse, but it certainly includes my wife, my children, and now my grandchildren. I should be able to, with confidence and joy, look forward to them becoming all that God's had in mind for them to be. And so I think that's what we're all interested in, we all want to do, but we sometimes approach it in a hope-so kind of situation. We hope that we're doing it the right way, when I really do believe God has given us some keys to look at that we can really do it in a very determined way. Will we be perfect? No, not at all. But the grace of God not only gets us our salvation, but as we walk in grace, He gives us the results of our work so that we can do far more than we ask or even imagine according to His power that's at work within us. So it's with that confidence and joy we can use what we can learn from, I think, the temperaments to start down that road to help our children and those around us to be all they're meant to be. So let's look at my family. This is the group. There's 18 of us. As you notice, there's big people and there's little people. There's no in-between people, okay? So I have 3 children. Emily's over on that side with her husband, Troy. Her 3 are those 2 boys and Mary Brooke right here. Covington just kind of snuck over there because he probably didn't like his brothers at the time. They were on the opposite end. Then I have my son, James, and his wife, Jessica. They have 4. There's Ellie in my lap, and then Covington, who's theirs too, and then Roman, who's sitting there by Ann, and then Wilder, who's by him. Their names don't change, their dates of birth, their birthdays do, and I have to keep up with that. So, and then Grace is my daughter with Casey, and Caleb's in front of her, Kent's in Ann's lap, and Eve is sitting there between us. So that's our group, and the reason I introduced that for 2 reasons. I'm very proud of them. And the second is they're going to be a lot of my illustrations for temperaments, in particular my children, because we're still developing. I know Mary Brooks, and I know Covington's, and I know Caleb's, and there's some of them I already figured out their temperaments. But this was a picture, that's that Christmas picture type thing. I think that was about 2 years ago. So this is the upgraded version of that. They always get a preschool, we have a preschool party, and they play the music, and they come marching out with their signs and stuff like that. So that's the group now. We've got 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 2 5s and 2 3s. And 7 of them are boys. You've probably noticed that. So that means we better have a hint in how God made them, or there's going to be issues. Not only with just keeping them located, but also keeping them in some degree of track that we can figure out where they will be in the future. So that's our group, and we'll talk about them. Whoop. Okay, let's go backwards. All right, so this is Sanguine, and I will let you kind of in on our family a little bit in how this came about. We were going on a trip to Disney World. It's one of those. From Hattiesburg you can get to Disney World in about 10 to 12 hours if you drive. And so we decided we would go one long weekend, believe it or not, spend 3 days there. So as we were driving, we took a break in Mobile, and we went to the mall there, and so to give everybody just a little break. And so I went into a bookstore, and as I was just walking around, went to the parenting thing and the Christian parenting thing, and came across this book, Raising the Curtain on Raising Children by Frances Latauer. And she's actually been here in your church. And so I picked that up, and as you will realize in just a little bit, my wife is the driver of the family. And so as she was driving, I was reading this book, and so that was my introduction. And really at Disney World is where God really revealed to me how significant this topic is. So as I got to know this, Sanguine is, that's a temperament that's shared by myself and my oldest daughter, Emily. And that we're the only ones that have the same temperament. Everybody else in our family, all 4 temperaments are represented, which I think was no coincidence in God giving me an opportunity to learn more about it in a very practical way. So sanguines, as you can see, we're the talkers, the actors, the cheerleaders. By the way, your pastor is sanguine too. Very much so, if you hadn't noticed. We're fun-oriented. We talk and laugh a lot. We enjoy being with people. We're happiest when everyone else is happy, and that's why I'm telling you. You may not enjoy what I am saying, and you may not think it's beneficial, but when I look at you, I would really appreciate if you would smile back at me, okay? Because if you don't, then I'll get kind of sad, and we'll just go home early. But because if we don't feel like we're making you happy, it really just causes us a lot of distress. So the world's a stage. We often have poor follow-through. We're chronically late and forgetful. This is painful. I hope you appreciate that when I give you these. It's difficult to stand up here and talk about your weaknesses. And by the way, temperaments are not good or bad. Okay, temperaments are not good or bad. There's strengths and there's weaknesses. The temperaments came about a long time ago. A guy named Socrates kind of came up with them. A guy named Galen talked about it later. And he actually based this on some body fluids that were present, or that he thought were present, that caused you to kind of be who you were. And it's not pretty to talk about, really. It's black bile, yellow bile, black bile, yellow bile, blood, and then phlegm. And yeah, I know, like you think he would have come up with something a little better, but so us sanguines kind of are the bloody group, and so it sometimes causes us a lot of pain when we have to talk about ourselves being late and forgetful. We can be sarcastic if you don't treat us right. We can kind of come with a cutting edge toward you. And there's some characters in the Bible that certainly seem to meet this personality. Certainly King David was one of them because he was a happy-go-lucky guy. Peter, who always was talking, didn't listen real well and really talked before his brain really got into gear much. Barnabas, who was the son of encouragement. And, of course, Samson, strong guy, but he had some weaknesses, didn't he? So that's kind of the characteristics of a sanguine. Now, a sanguine needs attention, approval, and affection. We need the presence of people and freedom to dream and some alone time to recharge. Now, what that generally means is that we need to feel accepted. A sanguine does. And this one here, the presence of people, Emily, my sanguine, you could say, Emily, it's time for you to clean up your room. And she would kind of hesitate. Sweet, Mary Brooks' mom, sweet as could be. She'd hesitate a little bit. And then she would say, well, can somebody go upstairs with me? So literally, I could take a book, walk upstairs, sit down in her room, against the wall, read, and she would clean up her room fine. In fact, Grace, my youngest, who's 6 years younger, at 12, Emily would say, well, it's time to go to bed. And Eve, the 6-year-old, would look at her and say, it's okay, Emily, I'll go upstairs with you. We can go now. Because she knew that Emily it wasn't from fear. She just didn't want to be alone because of the presence of people. And that's very important for you to understand because that temperament feeds off of other people, okay? So that's what us sanguines need. Now, we avoid, with a great deal of enthusiasm, we avoid dull tasks, being alone, routines, details, criticism, lofty goals, and unfortunately this group is a little more prone to addiction. So what that says is that anything that holds our feet to the fire, that causes us to have a deadline, that causes us for there to be criteria for us to meet, we will tend to avoid that. Now we can come up with great ideas, but we'll tend to avoid those sorts of things. Because here again, that's more of a task-oriented type thing, and we're more interested in people. So that's our sanguine group. Now, the choleric group, my youngest daughter, Grace, is a choleric. They are the bosses, the directors, the leaders of the thing. They are very goal-oriented. Not so much people-oriented. They're very goal-oriented. And they're independent spirits, determined, they're focused, they're loud, they can be great leaders, can try to dominate others. And interestingly enough, more men than women, but women who are choleric tend to be very popular women. I'm not sure exactly why that's the case. I'll let you fill in that blank, but that seems to be the case. And some of those people in the Bible that kind of meet that temperament are Paul, and I don't think any of us would have any problems understanding how Paul could meet that. But Martha, who got on to Mary, and Jesus kind of put her in her place, but got on to Mary a little bit. And old James, leader of the church, and then Joshua, who said, I don't care where y'all go, I'm going to tell you where I'm going. They're the leaders of the bunch. Now, the interesting thing is that cholerics need something to control or fix. They need appreciation of all their achievements. They need competition, challenges, and someone to take the blame. Because if you can't win, it's somebody else's fault, you know. But what was interesting about Grace, we figured out pretty early that this was who Grace was, because she tried to line the family up most of the time. And so Ann and I, in talking, said, what can we do to help Grace not try to boss all of us around? So we got Charlie, okay? And Charlie became a very important part of our family. He was a little Boston Terrier. And that dog loved Grace. And I remember in particular, Grace was about 7 or 8, maybe 9, 7, 8, 9, something. And my Sunday school class had a flag football game or something. And they said, won't you come play? I said, no, I can watch. So Grace and Charlie and I went to watch. And so Grace, I was here, Charlie was here, and Grace was here on the little bleachers. And so during the game, Charlie would lean forward, and Grace would say, Charlie, and he'd sit back down. He'd watch the game. And he'd lean forward, and Grace would say, Charlie, he'd sit back down. And so at halftime, I said, Grace, you might want to take Charlie and kind of let him run around a little bit. And so she went out, and he did, came back up, he sat down. The whole second half, same thing went on. Every time he'd start to move, Charlie, he'd sit back down. I had no less than 3, 4, maybe a half dozen of the girls in my Sunday school class come up and say, could Grace babysit for me? She said, did you see my children during this game? They were not nearly as well behaved as her dog was. So we would like for her to. So they have to have something that they can control. And we'll talk about that more the second session that we do. A choleric avoids rest, boredom, playing games they can't win, emotions, and people. Now, that sometimes, I mean, if you look at that, it kind of sounds kind of like a negative thing, and it's not meant to be at all. Cholerics need people because they need someone to lead. But a choleric is very interested in is interested in a task, but it's their task, and they want you to help them do their task. Okay? And if you don't, you're really not that important for them. Okay? They can move on without you. And it's the old thing, you know, kind of the choleric came up with, if you want something done right, do it yourself. Okay? And so that's the approach that cholerics have for their life. Okay, so now we have melancholies. Now, I say this for no particular reason, but melancholies are probably one of the strongest temperaments that we have. Does happen to be my wife's temperament, but I wouldn't say that just because of that. But the melancholies are here to get the job done. They're the doers of the world, all right? So they are order-oriented, they're sensitive and kind, they're well-behaved and neat, they're creative, artistic, self-reliant, independent, can become preoccupied with tragedy. They tend to be perfectionists, and we look at Moses, Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Esther as examples. And Moses, do you remember when Moses just got kind of fed up with the children of Israel? Remember what he did? Remember how he approached God? What did he ask God? I don't like these people anymore. And he turned his head to the wall and said what? Just take my life. I'm fed up with this. They do not behave like I want them to. Therefore, I'm out of here. So you have to appreciate melancholies have very strong needs, but they really get things done. So they need their own space, sensitivity to deep desires, order, and security. Well, my wife this kind of threw things into a tizzy. And Mary Brooke and I were laughing as we were coming up here because we were talking about this, and then we were looking at just how the temperaments of the three of us in a truck as we came up were being lived out just in this trip since yesterday. And we won't mention any of those. But it's just amazing that after we've moved, and I threw my wife into total disarray because we moved from a fairly good-sized house into a 400-square-foot apartment while they were building our other downsized house. And I've told her, I told her just a week or so ago, that I was perfectly content living in this 400 square foot apartment. There went a melancholy, I can tell y'all, because she didn't say it exactly like that, but she leaned forward to me and said, you do realize that you're living in a hotel room. And her order was thrown all out. But she had her little space above our bedroom for 35 years, her sewing room, that she kept, that was her space. And it was kind of like hallowed grounds. Nobody went up there. So they liked that order and neatness. They avoid noise, confusion, trivial pursuits, and the whole thing that this thing is worth, okay? The whole reason that I think God led me into this topic is this last line up here, being jollied. For the first 5 years of our marriage, at least, before I read this book, I asked her multiple times, what's wrong? And she'd say, nothing's wrong. And I'd say, you just don't seem happy. Now, understand there were some things that happened in our life that we didn't exactly plan. I'm a physician, she's a nurse. And Emily, Mary Brooks' mother, was born 9 months and 9 days after we got married. That wasn't planned. Kind of snuck up on us a little bit. It's a delightful thing. We wouldn't trade it for the world because we got Mary Brooke out of it. So, you know. But for those 5 years, I would just, and so as we talked more about it, and we talked a lot about it, as we talked more about it, I said, well, you just don't act happy. And she said, I am happy. And I took this probably the wrong way until I found this out. But she said, I'm happy. I'm just not goofy like you. And it did take a little bit for me to adjust to that comment until I read this, that melancholies don't like to be jollied. They're perfectly content like they are, and they're happy, but their happiness is expressed in a different way than us goofy sanguines. So the revelation, if you can't take anything, if you live, and let me just go, no, I'm not going to ask it yet. I'll ask it later. I have a public opinion poll kind of. All right, so now we've got the phlegmatics, okay? And the phlegmatics are the audience of the world. They're the observers. And my son James is the phlegmatic. And they are peace-oriented, quiet, easygoing, good listeners, consistent, rational, possible slow developers. And we look at Isaac, Joseph, father of Jesus, Hannah, and Nehemiah, who built the wall. All right, so to start with one of these, as James was developing, as he was growing after he was born, and of course we had Emily, who at 22 months, the reason we know, because we had moved into our home in Hattiesburg, and we were building a fence around it, and my mother was bringing Emily around the house. And at 22 months, a dog jumped out and barked. And Emily looked up at 22 months at my mother and said, that dog scared me. And, you know, I was pretty taken aback by that. And at 22 months, James was going, Mama, Daddy? And that was it. And so, in fact, I had a little girl about the same age come home. My nurse said, you need to listen to this little girl. And she was 2 years of age, a little bit older than James. And I went in and said, my nurse said you need to show me something. And the little girl slipped off the bench in there and stood up and said, Baa, black sheep, have you any wool? Yes, sir, 3 bags full. Quoted the whole thing. And James was at home going, Mama? Daddy? And I remember Ann's mom, James was about 9 months old, and he was sitting in his plate. But now James has his doctorate now in psychology, okay? So, you know, he started slow but finished fast. But anyway, so he was in a playpen in their kitchen, and Ann's mother was standing there just looking at him. And James was sitting in the middle of the playpen, and all the activity was going on in the house. And so her mother was standing there just looking down at him, and I walked over and just stood beside her. And you'd have to know Ann's mom, delightful lady, but very choleric. She looked at him and looked at me and said, is he all right? And I said, Mimi, we're praying that he is. So he just didn't come out of the chute real quick, but he finished strong. So that's a phlegmatic, okay? Now, their strength, whoa, this just jumped to a whole different program. Let's just go back to something here and see if we can regroup here. The bad thing about me up here freelancing is that I can touch stuff that I'm not supposed to touch. Okay, so, all right, so the phlegmatic's needs are peace, relaxation, attention, praise, self-worth, and loving motivation. Now, James doesn't like for me to give this talk because he says, Dad, you're kind of hard on me. But here again, at his, James pursued several different roads to get to his profession. And I remember at his rehearsal that the guys, every one of his groomsmen stood up at that rehearsal and said, the one thing I can tell you about James is that if you ever have a problem, you can go talk to him because he's such a good listener. And he's going to think about it, and he's going to give you the best advice he possibly can. So the whole time, God knew what he needed to do, but it just took James a little time to figure out that was his profession in life. But so, as you can see, the loving motivation part, you have to be careful with that because it can be very difficult for those of us who are a little more motivated to motivate them. In fact, I tell him sometimes, James, you're like pushing chain up a hill. There's a whole lot of effort, but you just don't make a lot of progress a lot of times. And so in high school, our rule was we thought all three of our children were adequately intelligent for them to make A's and B's. And so our rule was we will stay out of your face if you'll make A's and B's. And so multiple teachers would come to me as we would go to teacher meetings and just ball games and stuff, and they would see me and know that I was James's father. They would say, James just always comes up and says, what do I need to get to make a B in your class? And they say, most kids want to make an A. Why does James want to make a B in my class? And in fact, if he, on his report card, it was back in the old days when 85 to 93 was a B, okay? If he had an 86 in a class, that was wasted effort. Because he could have done just as well with an 85. And yet, what happens with phlegmatics, as happens with a lot of our children, but in particular with phlegmatics, because I deal with a good many of these kids in my practice even now, what happens to them is when they find their passion, it lights them up. But it's an internal passion. It's not a passion that I, as a parent, or anybody around them can do. I think it's a God-given passion. So what they avoid is conflict, initiative, decisions, and extra work, and then responsibility. It's not that they're not responsible people, but if they can move outside that, they're perfectly satisfied with avoiding that. So, our family. All right. So we'll take a little break after this. This is how God absolutely unequivocally revealed what temperaments are like. So I'm halfway through the book probably by the time we get to Disney World. And so we go to Magic Kingdom the first day. Second day we go to Epcot, okay? And then the third day we decide we'll let the children decide where they go today. So we were staying in this restaurant that so we ate breakfast and we said, okay, we're going to let the three of you decide, a little family planning type stuff. We'll let the three of you decide. Now, we're going to get up and just walk around there, as all of the restaurants in Disney World, it was an event in and of itself. So we were walking around the room looking at them over there. They were doing the head and all that sort of stuff. And I said, when you decide where you want to go, you raise your hand, okay? And so we walked around, and then all of a sudden 3 hands went there. We went back and sat down. And they said, we know where we want to go. And so where did they decide to go in Disney World after we'd driven 12 hours? Where did they want to go? The pool. In the restaurant, in the hotel where we were staying. We drove 12 hours for them to swim. And so, okay, we'll go to the pool. We'll go to the pool. So Ann, in her melancholy self, who likes her space, who likes her quiet, who likes her peace, stayed in the room to read. I said, that's fine, because my sanguineness, we went down to the pool, and I was having a jolly old time. We were watching everybody have fun. Everything was going on. Emily, my other sanguine in the family, she jumps in the pool, and within 5 minutes has a best friend. They're talking. They're just laughing together. They're having a big time. That girl gets up and goes somewhere else, and she's 9. she goes somewhere else, and and they hug, oh, I'm so sorry. And so she leaves. In 5 minutes, she's got another best friend. They're talking, playing, they're having a big old time. I'm sitting there looking at this, and I'm reading this book. People. She likes people. James, who's 6 at the time, my phlegmatic, my peaceful-oriented son, he's over, standing up. The pool's behind him. The edge of the pool is right here. He's in the water, but the edge of the pool's right here. He has a little boat, and he's going, boo, boo, boo. He's just standing there having a big time by himself. And this kind of bully kind of little kid comes up, snatches the boat out of his hand, and walks up. And James looks at him and then goes, boo, boo, boo. Just happy to be at peace with himself. And then Grace, my 3-year-old choleric, the rule was, Grace, you see this, and this is a huge pool like Disney World has. And there were like 6 lifeguards all over the place. Well, over here to the side, there's this round kiddie pool. It's about this deep. And it's big, it's huge. And so I say, okay, Grace, now, because you can't swim, you have to stay over here in the kiddie pool. And she said, okay, I can do that. So she gets over in the kiddie pool, and she's playing around, swimming around a little bit and stuff like this. And all of a sudden she thinks, this is real boring. So she stands up on the side of the pool and goes, boom, and just dives out into the water and goes, bam, like this. All 6 lifeguards stand up. And so she stands up in the middle of the pool, throws her hair back like this, starts walking out. Well, all 6 lifeguards are doing this. Where is this kid's parents? So I'm just sitting there reading my book. Okay? She goes back to the other side, back to the side of the pool, and she stands up on the pool and goes, out there. The lifeguards are still standing up. She throws her hair back. So she does this 4 or 5 times, and then the whole pool says, that looks like pretty good fun. So the whole pool starts doing it. And Grace, at 3, goes to the middle of the pool and goes, I promise, she is directing the kiddie pool. Large and in charge. And I'm reading this book, and I said, God, you made my 3 kids that came out of the same 2 people so absolutely different. And you know what he told me? Not audibly. Not audibly. I'm waiting for that, but not audibly. But a very strong impression. You know what he told me? You ain't seen nothing yet. If you'll just rear them the way I made them, you will be amazed. And you know what? I have been. They're 3 great adults. In their own way, they married great, strong Christian people. And their children are growing up in the admonition of the Lord. And that is what I think that we're about as parents of children. And so we're going to take a break. I've got a minute or two. We'll take a couple of questions if you happen to have them, or if there's anybody that's got any. If you got a question, we'll talk. If you don't have a question, that's fine, but we'll get back together in about 15 minutes, and we'll look at a very important thing, and that is, how do these temperaments come together in parenting styles? Because you see, your temperament could be the same as your child's, which you think, oh, that'd be good. May not be. Or it could be the opposite of your child, and you think, well, that's terrible, but it may not be. But there's 16 different ways that God puts families together that allows us to join together in a way that if we will let it, we'll join together in our differences to make us so strong that the world will never be able to pull us apart. So do I have any just burning question out there that Shane can bring a, there's a question back there. He could, whoop, back on. And if it's a theological question, Shane's going to answer.
This is great. Thank you so much, Ronnie.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to ask how, I guess, you would describe the variation in strengths in sort of a dominant personality within the individual, or a blend where they may have one that's dominant and then a couple others that are like secondary.
Well, actually, I've realized this as I was about halfway through this. One slide was omitted. that kind of laid the basics of the temperaments, and either I jumped over it, it was not in here. Temperaments are about 70-30, okay? There's a dominant temperament of about 70% and about 30%. And understand that this is, that temperaments are really a generalization, and there's no question in my mind that there is a dominant temperament. But temperaments also can be masked in certain situations and can be brought out. Like, I'm a pretty strong sanguine and a kind of weak choleric, but because I'm medical director of my clinic and because I'm a husband, a father and a husband, I'm supposed to take on a leadership role. And so that causes me to bring out more of that. Melancholy, 0. I'm fairly phlegmatic because they'll tell me you'll walk around a controversy a good ways before you'll approach it. So, but there is that dominant temperament that we have, and then that secondary, and we're going to talk about how those things go together. Like, to me, one of the strongest temperaments, and I'll say it in front of her, Mary Brooke has it. Is a sanguine with a melancholy second. Because those are very people-oriented people, but they're very task-oriented. And just to give you a little example of that, and I'm walking on thin ice here because I didn't preload this. We were talking yesterday and just talking about something different. And Mary Brooke, who's in the 6th grade, Ann said, "Now, Mary Brooke, you understand what an adjective is, right? Tell them what an adjective is, Mary Brooke, loud as you can." Now, that's a melancholy, okay? When you answer what's an adjective with about 5 sentence answer. So yes, there's that dominant, and then there's that secondary temperament. So good, very good question. Thank you, because I should have covered that. Anything else? Well, we'll have more time for questions on this next part because it's, okay.
Curriculum that we'll use going forward. Ronnie and I have been working on something for a year now that takes this into the area of anxiety and stress based on Paul's letter to the Philippians. And that is something that we'll be working on next fall when the book comes out. Where we'll unveil this, though, is 3 years ago, I've been doing these cruises. Maxie got me into this 6 years ago, these cruises.
Bless your heart.
I know, it's terrible. It's a burden that I carry, but thank you, Maxie. But the last cruise did not go off. And so what we did is when the cruise for 2022 is the cruise that we decided that would be our first one back, and we decided that we would lead this on the anxiety algorithm. So Ronnie and I will be the leaders of that cruise. You have information in front of you about that cruise. If you didn't get the information, please let us know and we can get that to you. We also put information in front of you about a podcast that will be launching that Ronnie and I have been planning for about 3 or 4 months. Can you tell that I'm filling up his retirement next year? So as he's retiring, I've actually said, "Hey, come work with me." And so we're excited about that. You have information in front of you. We'll be back in just a second, but I just leave you with this little nugget of information from what he's talked about previously. I thought when Pokey and I did this had such great effect on the way we raised our children. And I thought, what a great talk, because this was so helpful, because we have a sanguine, a melancholy, and a choleric in our 3 girls. But I will tell you that now that 2 of them are married and 1 is graduating from high school, it's even more important to understand this. And I have heard people say it became even more important for our grandchildren because we were able to be in an advise and consent role like the Senate as a grandparent, whereas a parent, it was a little bit different, boots on the ground. So if your children, if you don't have children or you have children that are out of the house, this really affects all our relationships. It's cast within the setting of parenting because it's easy for us to understand that context. 10 minutes. All right, we'll be back.
I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You will lead me through the fire, and in darkest night, you were close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. And I have lived in the
I want to live in expectation of your kingdom breaking through. My hands are open, my heart is free. Open the heavens, rain down on me, fall down on me. My hands are open, my heart is free. Open the heavens, rain down on me, fall down on me. And I want to come to you in boldness. By your power I receive. I want to live in expectation. With you I'll do greater things. 'Cause I believe in greater things. Yeah, my hands are open, my heart is free. Open the heavens, rain down on me, fall down on me. My hands are open, my heart is free. Open the heavens, rain down on me, fall down on me. Till all it overwhelms is overwhelmed by you. And every soul has seen what you can do. A holy visitation where everything is changing. And there's no empty spaces when you move. 'Cause my hands are open, my heart is free. Open the heavens, rain down on me, fall down. Sing it out. My hands are open, my heart is free. Open the heavens, rain down on me, fall down on me. My hands are open, my heart is free. Open the heavens, rain down on me, fall down on me. My hands are open, and my heart is free. Open the heavens, rain down on me, fall down on me. Rain down on me, fall down on me. My hands are open, my heart is free. Open the heavens, rain down on me, fall down on me. My hands are open, my heart is free. Open the heavens, rain down on me, fall down on me.
We're going to go on and get started. This session is going to be a little bit more interactive. Someone just asked me, where will this course, as it's edited and distributed, where will this be? We have partnerships signed. They're agreed upon, signed. They will be signed with Asbury Seminary and also with United Seminary. With World Methodist Evangelism. The Servant School courses will go on the platforms of those three organizations. We're in the talks with Wesley House and Baylor. But our main goal is to train laity. Seminaries train future pastors. We believe that laity theological education, and not just in the theology of what you know, but why you know what you know, which is apologetics, and how do you live what you know, which is applied theology. And that's why we have those 5 areas, again, biblical studies, theology, apologetics, spiritual formation, leadership, stewardship, and family health and wholeness. And just to give you an idea, Maxie just did part 1 of his spiritual disciplines servant school, which turned out fantastic, and we're so excited about it. But he just like every star, he's negotiating for a contract increase for the parts 2 and 3. So we don't know what the future of that'll be, but you never know. So, all right, we're going to go in and get started. So, Ronnie,
Thank you. Well, I hope that was informative. In fact, this is our second one. I call it With Confidence and Joy, and that's helping your children become all that God's had in mind for them to be based on that Romans 5:2. So, how many of you, show of hands, how many of you feel like you kind of got it figured out, like kind of where you are maybe, and where your family members are? Is it kind of gelling just a little bit, maybe a little bit? Where you take that thing and look at it, and I mean, here again, talking to somebody, you're not 100%. I mean, you're going to have some things that are definitely fit you, and some things that maybe don't fit you. The group that usually has the hardest time fitting into these categories is the melancholy group, because they want it to fit tight. They want it to be exact. So if you're struggling to know what you are, you're probably melancholy. Because you want it perfect. They are more perfect oriented. So we're going to look at how these things go together. There's 16, of course, different matches. But first, let's look at just one little thing here that we might spend a little time on, because I think in this group you may be a little more interested in this than the other. But here again, this doesn't just apply to children. It certainly applies to grandchildren. And your role, Shane and I were talking about it, you start out in your level of dealing with your children. You're here, and the children are here learning from you. And then as they grow, then they get married, and you're really kind of on a level playing then, and you're helping as more of an advisor. And then they move this way, and they become more taking care of you. And my mother just turned 100, and she's not doing real well with this part right now. She still would like to be more in control than she is, but about 4 or 5 years ago, we had to take her car away, because after she hit 3 cars in one house at the same time, it was time. Mom, maybe not, but she was going to the hairdresser, so no house nor car was going to stand in her way. So let's look at one other little thing before we deal with that, and that is this area of marriage. And how do temperaments do with marriage? And I don't know if you realize this, but you and your spouse might not be exactly alike in temperaments. No, definitely not. And
One wants to go to the party and stay late. One wants to go and go early.
or not even go to the party. Yeah. Let's just wait for the party to come to us. And isn't it interesting? There's no question. In fact, my mom's melancholy. And, when my dad, I said, Dad, I think I found somebody I want to marry. And he said, really? And I said, yeah. I said, she's a lot like Mom. And he said, really? And I said, yeah. And because Ann was so organized and she could get things done, she was always on time. And the great thing about that, she tolerated my disorganization and not being on time and not getting things done in the way that I was supposed to get them done. You think you went to medical school, and I'm going to tell you, it was the grace of God. It was the grace of God. So you tend to, opposites attract. And the reason is because I saw in her what I wanted to be, and then she saw in me maybe well, I'm not going to say that. That would have been pretentious, that she thought there was something attractive about me just from external. But anyway, she saw in me a little bit more of the fun and enjoyment of life that she kind of wanted to do. So I was doing a parenting class one time, and I told them, I said, and in my parenting class, I think it's very appropriate for me to talk about marriage, because it's very difficult to be a good parent without being a good spouse. because that's the first thing that the children look at as far as who they want to become. And so I was talking to them, and I said, it's really interesting that when God puts us together, he doesn't match us up like a mirror image. He really slides us over. And for the first time, I started thinking, he slides us over so that we interlock. Because if you come up here and try to pull my arms apart, and I'll actually do this in a parenting class, I'll say, come up here, call somebody, and I'm going to do the best I can to keep my hands together, pull them apart. And as hard as I try, it's very easy for them to pull my hands apart. But I say, if you slide me over, and then we interlock like that, try to pull my arms apart now. They can't. Not because of my strength, because they're locked together. That's what temperaments are all about. So I want to do a little experiment here, okay? Because there are temperaments that tend to marry, okay? And I just want to see if you kind of know your temperament, okay? Because what tends to happen is that sanguines, and it happened with me, tend to marry melancholies, and cholerics tend to marry phlegmatics. So I just want to see if you're a sanguine and you married a melancholy, raise your hand. I just want to see if that's okay. There's one or two. There's one. Okay. All right. So if you're a choleric, and now remember, this is not gender oriented. Okay. Cholerics, there are a lot of cholerics are men, but there are women who are cholerics too. So if you're a choleric and you married a phlegmatic, raise your hand. Okay, we got that. I see who raised that hand first. One of them had to. Get your hand up. No. Well, and we tend to go together with those people who tend to bring out our strengths and cover our weaknesses. And isn't that what God does? He wants to bring out our strengths. And he said, I'll take care of your weakness. There's nothing, we were studying last Wednesday night about doubt. And, one of the greatest passages to me is that little passage where the disciples were trying to cast out a demon from this father's son, and they couldn't. And so Jesus came down from the Mount of Transfiguration, and he said, the man said, if you can, would you please heal my son? And Jesus said, if I can, all things are possible to those who believe. And this guy made a statement that set me free. He really did. When I first read this, I exploded because the man said, I do believe, help my unbelief. And Jesus healed his son. So he did two things. He healed the boy, but he filled up the doubt in that man, and that allowed him to do his work. The only faith we need that Jesus needs is for us to come to him. He can take care of the rest. And so that's what temperaments are supposed to do. That's what learning your spouse's temperament is supposed to do. It's supposed to fill in the gaps. Now, it does kind of rub you the wrong way sometimes, okay? I'll just tell you that. Because just like this afternoon, what is this street right here? Poplar. Did they do this just to torture people? Is that the purpose of that, and is to bring out mental health problems? Okay, well, it certainly does. And so we came from our hotel, and we're driving and looking for a Starbucks for Ann. And so we got to a certain place, and then she said, why don't you stop and just let me drive? Now, I could take that the wrong way, okay? I could take that as she didn't think I was capable of driving. But I knew in her melancholy way that she felt more comfortable being in control because she could do it better. And actually, she did do it better. So it doesn't bother me anymore. It's only taken about 40 years for me to come to that realization. And take, for instance, financially, God's blessed us. We've done well. I'm a pediatrician. I'm not, going to make the bank, but we've done extremely well. And so, but for the first 10 years of our marriage, we were not doing real well financially because we couldn't get our bills paid. We had the money, but I just wouldn't sit down and pay the bills, not because I didn't want to or didn't think I should. It's just I would get around to it someday. And, when people started calling and said, what's the deal? I said, I'm going to get to it. And she said, the people are coming to take our car, okay? So, and she said, why don't you let me do that? And I said, really? And she said, yeah, and she's been doing our finances now. And some of you guys may think, well, that's terrible, that's because you're melancholic. And, but it's the greatest thing in my life. I'll just tell you, when my wife took over those finances, it freed me up, and it freed her up from the anxiety and worry about our bills not being paid. So why do we have to say everything has to be done the same way? Okay? We don't. If we look at the way God made us, and the way not only God made us, but the way God put us together, it is a life of freedom to enjoy being a child of the King. And he doesn't do those things by coincidence or by accident. So I just mentioned this thing about marriage so that you can start letting God allow your marriage to become all it's supposed to be, with confidence and joy, okay? Because in those situations where there is a rub, where there is a problem, even as we move along in marriage, when there is a problem, you consider it all joy, because he said if we do, the promise that will lead to is that we'll be mature and complete, lacking in nothing, James tells us. So we want a mature marriage that lacks in nothing. So start off by considering it all joy. Okay, so let's look at, this is parenting, but this not only just doesn't apply to parenting, because this is going to apply definitely to marriage, because as these things come together, as these temperaments come together, parenting is just one way it happens. This comes together not only in marriage, but it comes together in your workplace. It comes together in your church. It comes together just with your neighborhood, because they're going to be, we've never been a part of a homeowners association, but melancholies are always in charge of the homeowners association, if you didn't know that, okay? And you know, anybody that walks around with a stick the height of the mailbox and puts it down, that's melancholy, okay? I'll just tell you. And you have to appreciate the fact that that person's been given a job, and they're going to do that job to the best of their ability, and their job is, they're not there to just drive you crazy, okay? Although it may do that. So let's look at how these things come together. All right, so the first is a sanguine parent, sanguine child. We did have that situation at our house, my daughter Emily. So let's look at that. The strengths that we encourage each other and others, very encouraging combination, because we're both people-oriented. We like other people to be happy. We're optimistic, and we recover quickly. Now, as Ann will tell you, I pout, okay? I'll just tell you, if things don't go my way, I will pout a little while. And she used to, well, she didn't ever really try to talk me out of pouting, because that was not her job. Okay? Because she's task-oriented, and I'm a big boy, and I should get over it myself. And so, but I do pout, but we recover fairly quickly. Our weaknesses are that in that situation, we may be competitive. Now, if it's male-female, if it's the father or daughter, it's not as bad, because there was not as much for us to compete about. I didn't want to be a cheerleader. I mean, nothing wrong with a male being a cheerleader, but I didn't want to be. And we can be unproductive, because our main goal is to have fun, not to produce. Okay? So we, and as the day went on and we were supposed to be doing something, we had a great time staying around talking about doing it, but we really a lot of times didn't actually do it. So, and guess who didn't like that when she came to check on our work? Okay, we've got a sanguine parent and a choleric child. The strength of that is the parent's a great cheerleader for those leadership qualities. In other words, I cheer Grace on. Even today, Ann will tell you, Grace will call us, and I'm a great cheerleader for her, because she's got a business. She started this business 4 or 5 years ago, and it's a brand. She's actually graduated from Mississippi State in architecture, and went out and got a job with an architect. And even her professors in architect school said, you go ahead and work your first job as an architect, but you need to take a break after that. And a friend of mine had a branding company that she said, I think I'll work with him I talked to him, and she said, I think I'll work with him. And he's a big sports brander, so she met all these NBA stars, and, you know, they branded the Pelicans and the Miami Heat and the Atlanta Hawks. And so one day she said, I talked to Michael Jordan today. She said, so she got really excited about that. And so now she started this company called Bread, and because she said, I want people to know that the bread of life is Jesus, not their company. And she goes in and now kind of looks at the health of companies. And so now she's got I can't keep up with this because she's hiring people all the time. She got 14 or 15 employees only in 3 years. And so, but she still comes to us for encouragement, because she's a leader. She wants to get stuff done, but we can really encourage her to push on. A child can lead the parent in projects to be more successful. So us people that want to have fun, Grace would always say, okay, Dad, you can do this, but we got to get to it, okay? We can't just stand around talking about it. We can get to it. And I was telling them, she came last weekend and said, in fact, we delivered it about a week ago tonight. She said, Dad, I need a table. The architect comes together with the businesswoman, and she just moved into a car wash that was completely redone. And so they turned this car wash into her office, and it is cool as can be. But she said, I need a table, and it needs to be 16 inches wide and 13 and a half feet long. So we spent all last weekend building this table together, the whole family of us. And so she comes up with these great ideas, and she says, but we got to get to it, Dad. We can't just stay around talking about what this table's going to be. We got to get to it. So she's very good at helping me not only laugh what we do, but actually put out something. The weakness is that the child can manipulate the parent to take control. That's why we got Charlie, okay? Because if you have a choleric, they're going to control something. And so if you don't give them something to control, they will control you. And so be smart when you're living with a choleric, be that a spouse or a child, and help find something for them to control. Okay? Or if you like being controlled, that's okay. And then the parent can frustrate the child with lack of follow-through. Because, here again, us sanguines, we have great aspirations, but we just don't really put our nose to the wheel sometimes and get things accomplished. So we can frustrate them. But as they get older, the great news about it is Grace has no trouble with being a level with me right now. She respects me, loves me, but she will hold me to the task. So that's the great thing about that combination. So now we've got the sanguine parent and the melancholy child. A parent can cheerlead multiple talents and achievement. Remember, these sanguine people these melancholy people are great art. They're very artistic. They can do things that are really, they can be prodigies. They can really, they can accomplish a lot. And the parent, the great thing about a parent who is sanguine or a spouse that is sanguine is that you can cheer them on in that and help them do that instead of, well, let's look at this. The child can help the parent with details. So the child can say, okay, we can accomplish this if we do it this way. And so they can come up with a way to accomplish what the parent wants to accomplish. The weakness, parent does not understand child's lack of fun, may think they're depressed. Here again, they don't like to be jollied. And if you have a child who's melancholy and you expect them to laugh, and if you're sanguine, if you expect them to laugh and just be the life of the party all the time, you're going to be very frustrated. And the parent can hurt the child's self-esteem by being so flippant. The parent can embarrass the child because here again, in a loving way, my wife called me goofy, okay? And I could take it because I'm an adult. But a sanguine parent can embarrass a melancholy child by acting kind of goofy in front of their peers. And so that melancholy child doesn't need the sanguine parent, to be another one of her friends. That melancholy child needs the parent to be her parent and let her develop her friends as she sees fit. And then last, time and scheduling can be a real problem because the melancholies expect, Shane and I do a lot better with analog clocks, the regular clocks, not digital, but the analog clocks without the big hand on it. Just give us the little hand and we'll be on time pretty much, okay? But if you start getting the details, we'll get close to the hour, right? But if you start putting that one where we have to be like 15 minutes after, so that melancholy child will expect that parent to be on time. And us sanguines have a little issue with that. So that can cause a problem in that kind of relationship. That applies to not only parenting, but also in your marriage. Strengths of the sanguine and the phlegmatic child, that was myself and James. Relaxed relationship, not hung up on power or perfection. Here again, James and I get close, we're cool with that. And the great thing that I've been able to watch is I've been able to watch my son really help me a whole lot with a lot of my patients. Because I had one this past week that said, James is not like your typical psychologist. I said, what do you mean? He got his doctorate at Wheaton, so he's theology and psychology. They said, he kind of makes sense. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, he's real practical. When he tells you how to do something, he doesn't ask me a lot, well, what do you think about that? You know, he pretty much will tell me what I should do. So it's great to be able to watch James follow through with some of my parents and patients, that he's able to help like that. Because we want to get it done, but we're not hung up that it has to be done a certain way. And then our weaknesses: the parent may be frustrated by child's lack of enthusiasm. I told you about James and the A's and B's. Noise versus quiet. And James is pretty tolerant of that. I think he is phlegmatic sanguine. I think that's his mix. And so he does have those people skills, because he likes peace, but he likes peace with people. And he does great with his own children. There's a book out called Raising an Emotionally Intelligent Child by John Gottman, a Jewish guy that I teach his book at Temple Baptist Church, but because it's got such great things. And watching James and Jessica, his wife, who's a kindergarten teacher, raise their 4 children, 3 of which are boys that are very active, and helping them how to teach them how to do their emotions. It's great to watch his calmness in dealing with that. So that's the beauty of that. Even though that noise does, you can tell we have implements. Some people call them toys. We call them implements, essential implements, actually, as a matter of fact, and around our place. And so Ann can say, James came out to get on the skid steer, because he needs a little time by himself, because it's so unfortunate that this skid steer only will hold one person. It's just a little thing. So he comes out for his peace and quiet in that time. And then spontaneous versus routine. You know, sanguines like spontaneous because we don't have to plan that. I give talks like this, and I really enjoy doing it, but the planning part, I love doing the talk and hopefully helping people understand things, but putting the stuff together, you can ask Ann. I get out there and I battle away at just making slides and things like that, because that routine is something that causes me to do it by myself. And I'm not as fun by myself. So that James and I always like to do spontaneous things much more than routine things. Okay, choleric parent and the choleric child. The closest to this is Ann and Grace in our family, because I think Ann is melancholy choleric. When they agree they can conquer the world, I'm going to tell you, you put those two on a task, oh my word. The thing about it is, if you get in the middle of it, it's like being in the middle of a meat grinder, because they're not really concerned about you or your feelings or anything. It's just either get on board or get out of the way. And I see this. I mean, the beauty of watching this happen is to watch as Ann becomes so much of a consultant. I mean, Grace depends on her a whole lot for just opinions about not so much people, okay? And I don't think Ann will take this the wrong way. Not dealing with people, but dealing with her business, dealing with her office, dealing with. I mean, Ann went out just this last week and bought her a black dress for something, because Grace really wasn't interested in that. But Ann, task-oriented Ann, went out and had her several dresses to pick out from and all that sort of stuff, because Grace didn't have time to do it. So working with them, because you can watch that instead of Ann saying, Grace, that's just something you need to do yourself. But she understands Grace is in this leadership role in this company, and she doesn't have time to do it. And it's her joy. She gets all fired up about being able to help her do this task, okay, that Grace is not able to do. And can really lead the rest of the family to success, because that team causes us to accomplish stuff. Now, truth be known, it may not be a lot of fun, but we accomplished a lot, so those of us on the sanguine side make sure we try to throw a little fun in on top of it. And they usually are pretty tolerant of us as long as we don't get in the way of accomplishing the task, okay? So you got to work it together. Now, the weaknesses, boy, is this true. You can leave the rest of the family behind in common pursuit, okay? If they get their task, they're those leaders that get up to the top of the hill and they turn around. If nobody's behind them, it's their tough luck. But they're charging the hill, okay? And so they will press on. They lead to constant friction and fighting. This is a good time for me to say this. All the temperaments are redeemed in Christ, okay? All of them are redeemed in Christ. And I was telling them last night, it's something that we were at Chick-fil-A, and I don't get out a lot at all. in Jackson, and I didn't understand that there were like 14 lines that go around the Chick-fil-A building, okay? And I didn't understand what line I'm supposed to be in, and so Ann's telling me, now you get in this line. I said, okay. And so we make one loop, and she said, there's 3 people on this line. There's only one person taking orders on this line. And the unredeemed melancholy would have rolled down the window and said, hey, you need to come over on this line and get to work taking our order, okay? That's the unredeemed. My wife's redeemed melancholy rolled down the window and said, are we in the right line? So there is a way that melancholies can get their point across, but act like Jesus too. So you have to appreciate that. And so if you're not with them, I'm sorry. That constant friction usually doesn't happen in our family. Are we perfect? No. But it doesn't, because all of us are one in Christ. And we realize that's our number one calling, is to follow Christ and to be Christ-like and to have that fruit of His Spirit, not my spirit, not a melancholy spirit, not a choleric, sanguine, anything like that, but that love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control that only His Spirit can produce in us. That's not a temperament. That's the fruit of His Spirit within us. And so as He calls us to follow Him, He calls us to have that fruit that we display, even inside our temperament. But that's what makes it work together so well. Keep the whole family on edge. If you got a choleric boy and a choleric father together, I'm going to tell you, it's like eggshells you're walking around all the time. You're just waiting for one of them to explode. Because, there's this thing, that emotionality that cholerics have, it's that pent-up energy to accomplish, to conquer, to do something. And I maybe shouldn't say this, but I'll go ahead and say it. When you throw in a little testosterone with that, it's not a pretty picture. Because it can cause the rub to get real hot and fire to erupt. So that's the problem with that mix, if it's not that redeemed mix. Discipline can become too physical, unfortunately, and that fractured relationship leads to that child leaving. Okay? He will go find something, particular male, sometimes a female, but mostly the males will go find something to conquer if they can't conquer the family, or if they can't be appreciated for their leadership role. And then we've got the choleric parent and the melancholy child, which unfortunately can be a difficult one. Strength, the parent can stimulate creativity because they're really helping that child become all that they're supposed to be with that talent. Child can help parent organize his strategic plan. So if the parent can appreciate that, then the parent can actually put that melancholy child to task to accomplish what that choleric parent is trying to achieve in that leadership role. Even in a business thing. I mean, Grace could literally help me in my practice in ways that I would ask her. I'd say, well, what do you think about this or this? And she was able to see that happen. The weakness is a parent can crush the sensitive child. Parent forgets quickly, the child does not. Melancholies don't forget quickly, particularly where words are involved. Okay? So you have to appreciate that a word to a choleric is just a casual thing. A word to a melancholy child is not. So we have to guard those words carefully. And then finally, that fractured relationship, the child won't leave, but the child can become depressed. Now, melancholy implies depression. That's not it at all. Melancholy is here again. Remember, they may look like they're not happy, but they are in their way. They're just not goofy happy like the sanguines are. But unfortunately, if a melancholy is suppressed enough, they can get, frankly, depressed. Now, the choleric parent and the phlegmatic child, the strength is to avoid conflict. Child is usually very compliant. The child's quiet humor can lighten the parent's stress. Remember, that phlegmatic child likes peace. So to get along, that usually he will just to have peace be motivated by that choleric parent. Where they a lot of times are difficult to motivate, that parent can do that. The child's quiet humor can lighten the parent's stress. Cholerics, even though they want to achieve a lot, they feel a lot of stress to achieve a lot. And so you've got this phlegmatic child. They have kind of a dry wit. James, and here again, closest to this in our family maybe is Ann and James. When James was learning to drive, which leads me, at the end of this little story, I'll tell you one of the greatest quotes that ever happened in our family. When James was learning to drive, the girls, Emily and Grace and I would sit in the back seat. And so they'd say, where do y'all want to go? And James would be driving and Ann would be sitting in the passenger seat. Phlegmatic and melancholy. And so We'd tell them where we wanted them to go, and then as we get close, we'd say, we don't really want to do that, because we knew it was way more entertaining watching James drive with Ann in the passenger seat than going to any movie or anything we could possibly do. Because James and she fell for this every time. It was one of the greatest disappointments of my life, that she fell for this every time. But we'd come to a stop sign, and James would be stopping, waiting for traffic, and just about the time real big, bright lights would be pretty close, he'd just tap the brake, just laid it off just a little bit, just enough for his mother to go, "Quick, James, don't pull out, the car's coming." And I would say, "Why do you follow?" He does that every Friday night when we're going out to eat. She said, "It just drives me crazy. Why do you do that?" And James would just sit there and go, No. But they have a relationship that's very interesting. James, after he'd been driving now, he was in college. We were going to Ann's brother's for Thanksgiving, who lives up north of Hattiesburg. We were on Highway 49. We were pulling off to go to the road and by this time, James, Emily and Troy were married, but hadn't had Mary Brooke yet. So the rest of us were in the back in the Suburban, and Grace and I always sat in the very back of the Suburban so we could laugh at the rest of the family. And so we were sitting back there, and so we come off of 49 down to the road that we were going to get on, and Ann in the driver's seat with James driving said, "Turn left," and so James hesitates for just a second. He looks both ways, and Ann said, "I told you to turn left," and he said, "Well, I was just thinking," and I thought my son-in-law Troy was going to throw up. Because Ann made this classic statement that still reverberates in our family multiple times. Ann turned to James and said, "If you will just listen to me, you will not have to think." And it was heartfelt. You could just tell, because in her melancholy self, she was doing her best to take over for her totally inept, phlegmatic son's inability to think for himself. Now, my wife does not think less of James. I'll tell you, she admires him and respects him a whole lot. But it's just in that desire to get the task done. One of the highlights of our whole family career. So, the weakness is lack of motivation is very frustrating for a parent. And this is one of the ugliest words in the human language to me is shame. I see children all the time that are victims of shame. The Holy Spirit convicts. Satan condemns with shame. And to me, the difference in conviction and condemnation, which produces shame, is conviction. The Holy Spirit is constantly telling me, "You don't have to do that. You're redeemed. You're made in the image of God, and you don't have to act like that. And you can do better." And Satan is telling me this whole time is, "Nah, you're a bad person. And bad people just do bad things." And that's what shame does to a child. A parent that shames a child says, in fact, we had just lived in Hattiesburg about a year, and I was on my back porch when we were still in a subdivision. And I heard the dad throwing a baseball with his son, and I didn't really know much about this at that time. And I heard this conversation. They were throwing a baseball. His dad said, "Come on, throw it right here. Throw it to the glove. Throw it to the glove. Throw it to the glove." He said, "How many times do I have to tell you, throw it to my glove? I guess you'll just never be worth anything." That's shame. That's shame. And unfortunately, in this situation, choleric parents want so hard for their children to achieve. And this phlegmatic, a lot of times children, that's not the way they're wired to have the drive to achieve like that parent wants them to. And so to accomplish that, the parents sometimes will drop down to that, what they think will motivate, which will really only shame. All right, choleric parent and sanguine child, both productive and fun-loving team. They can be powerful influencers. The weakness is the parent can absolutely wear out the child, okay? Because the parent, remember, the choleric is people-oriented, but people to get them to do what they want them to do. Whereas cholerics are task-oriented, but they're about doing what they want to do. If you don't go with them, that's okay. But a choleric will drag you with them to accomplish the task that they want to do. And it can wear out a sanguine child who's just looking for a good time, Dad. You know, what are we going to do this Saturday? Well, we're going to do this. Hey, how about a little fun? Well, we'll have that after we accomplish those 20 things we're going to accomplish together. And then child can have too much fun for the parent. And, you know, how many parents, you're just being silly. Quit that. Get serious about this. And parent can have too much work for the child and wear them out, like we talked about before. So that's that choleric sanguine group. Melancholy parent and melancholy child, you talking about accomplishing some stuff. This team can do some stuff. And I'm going to tell you, if you see a marriage with two melancholies, they're generally the ones that you think, how do they do all that they do? They're involved in everything in the city. They're involved in everything at church. They never wear out. They are just doers. Now, they may be behind the scene. They're not like me and Shane want to be up here and everybody knows we're doing it. Sorry. But I know that's not true, but I have to use you as an illustration because you're the only one I know. But they're the doers, the doer bees, you know. And they can share sympathy for each other's sensitive spirits because the melancholies do have a very sensitive spirit that a lot of times other temperaments don't really appreciate. So they do appreciate how they feel about things. Their weaknesses, child may resist if the parent always wants to do it their way, which melancholies can get kind of locked into that, you know. And one may quit trying if the other takes on too much responsibility. By that I mean, you know, here again, sometimes it's hard for the parent to wait on the child to catch up with them and to catch up with their ability to do something. And then they both do have that tendency and that sensitive spirit to get depressed. And if they get depressed together, sometimes it's hard for them to crawl out of that hole. So you do have to watch for that. And then the melancholy parent and the phlegmatic child, this is the combination that can get that phlegmatic child to do the most, okay? Especially like in James's situation, Anne was able to really pull out of James, and sometimes in a very direct way, but she was because he started to appreciate, especially after we started learning these temperaments, and I taught my children the temperaments too. As they started learning more about who we were as parents and who they were as children, that he started to appreciate that she was not really pushing him to do anything, but only for his good. And so as they would do that, she could pull out of James a lot of times more than I could. And then they can work well together if the child can handle it. And that's what you got to be careful of. It's got to be age appropriate and it's got to be talent appropriate task. Weaknesses that parent can overwhelm with workload. The child can have an achieving system, and if a sibling, and if that's the case, the melancholy parent will attach to that, and this phlegmatic child will be left in his peace, but not to accomplish very much. And then the child can develop a stubborn attitude if pushed too hard to accomplish. We had a little miniature donkey one time named Mick, and Mick was just like a phlegmatic in a lot of ways. I mean, you know, if you pulled Mick, he would just sit down, you know, and if you've ever tried even a miniature donkey, it's hard to pull. So, and Ann made me get rid of him. I don't know why, just because he ran up and down the fence going, hee-haw, hee-haw. She said, I know I married a country boy, but I'm not going to be a Beverly hillbilly, okay? We're getting rid of this donkey. But I finally figured out, and it's kind of true with the phlegmatic child, especially for a melancholy parent, if I wanted to tie Mick to this post, I would pull Mick this way, because he would sit down, and as I pulled him a little bit, he would back up. And so then I would just turn around and tie him up to the post. So it's the same way with this melancholy phlegmatic temperament. The melancholy parent can learn, and you can call this manipulation, and it's not, but I don't think it is. It's really helping somebody do things in a way that they feel comfortable doing it. And that's what, even with spouses, you know, Ann encourages me in ways that I figure out, you know, she was actually wanting me to do something different, and it worked. And I'm real glad for two reasons. And one, we accomplished the task, and she was smart enough to outsmart me, and I like that. So that's what you have to do with this combination of melancholy parent and phlegmatic child. Then child can accomplish a stubborn attitude. We talked about that. Okay, let's go to this one. Melancholy parent and a sanguine child. If allowed, this child can add some excitement to the parent's life. The parent can help with lacking organizational skills because, you know, and I make this comment every almost day because it's not just the temperaments, it's gender too. Moms come in complaining of their son's lack of organizational skills every day. And I tell them, I said, you know, what was one of the first things God said to Adam? You're not going to make it, dude. I got to do something different. So that's where you ladies came from, okay? He took the best part of us out and made y'all because we needed so much help. And so that's the situation in this thing. That melancholy parents are wonderful things to all the temperaments because a melancholy parent can really help children. And as we allow our spouses to do the same thing, will allow us to accomplish a whole lot in life if we'll just understand their real need for organization and task. And then the melancholy parent and the choleric child can be a powerful team if the parent allows the child freedom. But you have to be careful not to be too critical because that controlling child will rebel and they'll start doing things their way. And the child can develop a team of resistance within the family. In other words, this child can lead the rest of the family in rebellion against the parent. So you have to be very careful of that happening. Then the phlegmatic parent and this group, the strength is a very agreeable relationship. A parent allows the child to pursue their own interests in their own way. So two peace-loving people are going to get along because they don't really come into conflict. But unfortunately, the weakness is that they're not very motivated to accomplish much. They may reduce expectations of each other even morally. And the parent can say to the child that is wanting to do a little something, can I play football? No, you know, can I be a cheerleader? I just don't think that's something good for you. So the phlegmatic parent can kind of be kind of an anchor to what the child wants to do, even to the phlegmatic child. And then the phlegmatic child and the phlegmatic parent and the choleric child, very helpful to the parent because they're the motivators, the leaders. But they have to the phlegmatic parent does have to give some control to the child. And the child can quickly learn to control the parent. A choleric child with a phlegmatic parent, the child will take over the family. And you have to be careful with that. And discipline can be weak if it's even present. And you know that a child with no discipline is a very dangerous thing. So the phlegmatic parent has to work hard with this choleric child to accomplish something. And then next to last, we have the phlegmatic parent and the melancholy child. The parent allows the child to develop talents and tasks, and the parent's not critical to the sensitive child. But the child can become overly critical of the parent's lack of effort, and the parent may even avoid a child's call for help emotionally because, remember, the phlegmatic parent is looking for peace, even in the light that the melancholy child is calling out for help. And then finally in that group, child may give up on a relationship due to parents' seemingly lack of concern. That is not an apathy thing. It's a thing that's looking for peace, but the child can misinterpret it. To be honest with you, that can be a problem in a marriage too, that one spouse can call out for emotional support. The other one does not see or sense that, and so for that reason, they tend to grow apart instead of closer together. But understanding temperaments, in particular in a marriage, can help that melancholy spouse that needs that emotion come to that phlegmatic spouse and say, I know that you want peace. What can you do to help me within that peace? So they can approach it within that temperament. And then the phlegmatic parent and the sanguine child, pretty cool because that's a good relationship if the parent allows the child to provide the entertainment. So the child can be very entertaining for this parent that really is trying to just see peace, but they can bring out that dry humor that parent tends to have as a phlegmatic. The weakness is that both would like to have more peace and fun and work. They just want to have a big time, and so the work is not the important part of that relationship. And then finally, as the child gets older, a parent may allow the child to find fun outside the home. In other words, they're not really as concerned about that child staying and participating in the family, and that child's going to go outside to find something else. So as we look back at those verses, I think to understand the temperaments that God put within us, and here again, it's like Shane said, and there's a lot of different measures of temperament and tests you can do for temperaments. This is just one that, to be quite honest with you, I was exposed to. It's the first one. I've looked at those others, and a lot of times they're too complicated for me, but it's just a lot easier for me to look at these four and see the combinations. But we're not like we are by accident. And yet, we do have to look at the fact that we are nurtured in certain ways that bring out, hopefully, that bring out the strengths of those temperaments and allow those weaknesses not to stand in the way of us actually becoming all that God's had in mind for us to be. And so that's what I encourage you in, is that hopefully, and this is, I apologize, this has been a skim across the top look at temperaments. It's a great subject, and there's references there that you can read. But I hope that you've just gotten enough to say, I need to read more and learn more about this. Here again, it's not the answer to all the world's ills, but knowing this, at least for our family, knowing this concept of temperaments has allowed us to love each other in a way that we understand when people are doing things that seem to go against the way we are, but also allowing us to love them in a way that brings out the strengths that allow them to be all that they're supposed to be. So for me, it's been a great journey. I absolutely look forward to doing it with these next 10 as they come along, because those temperaments are coming out in them in delightful ways, sometimes not as delightful ways, but we look forward to each one of them doing what God wants them to do. So you want me to close this? Is that okay? Oh, questions. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm trying to stay on the clock. I'm trying not to be sanguine.
Any questions or comments?
Questions about it? Here again, I know this is a quick survey of it.
I'll tell you what I've been doing over here. The choleric part of my personality has been writing down and making a list of, I know what part 2 of this, the second 201 version and the 301 version of these courses are going to be, because I think for so many of us, being able to understand that 70-30 blend and being able to understand how those interactions happen in relationships that don't have the kind of intensity and magnitude that a parent-child or a spouse-spouse. I think that's so important. Ronnie, someone asked at the break who were the personalities in my family. I am definitely the sanguine. I'm a sanguine choleric, very similar to what Ronnie is. Pokey is a choleric. Okay, I'm going to make a statement here, and I'm already in trouble because I've been the horses behind today on something, so I'm already in trouble. So I'm going to go in and say Pokey is a choleric melancholy.
I agree.
And
just like my wife. Isn't that interesting? That God knew that we needed strong women in our lives to control us.
The one thing that gets me in trouble more than anything else is this is the comment that when I get tired and I get frustrated, this is the comment that I know will set her off, and I still say it after 31 years of marriage. I'll say, you get things done or you show up on time when it's important to you. Okay, you ready? Yeah, please, everybody emotionally slap me. I'll take it right now, okay?
Do you know who all did that? All the Melancholies in the audience.
Well, the funny thing is the other day, Pokey put this thing together for one of Emily's final things on Palm, and they had an event that Emily needed to be there, and Emily was running 15 minutes late, and Pokey got in the car and said to me, I am so frustrated that she is late. Now, if you know anything about our house, can I say it? Can I say it, Ann? Do it. Pokey is never on time. But she is for her things. And when she said it, I really thought I was having a stroke. I thought I could not figure out who this person was that was in front of me. So Pokey is a choleric melancholy. Which is interesting that sanguines marry melancholies for a reason. I married the melancholy part of Pokey, but it's the choleric that shows up most of the time. So anyway, she gets on a plane in the morning to go fly to Sarah Grace, so I guess I'll say whatever I can say right now. But Sarah Grace is our sanguine. Juliana is our choleric. And Emily is our precious melancholy. And this is how I...
Phlegmatic.
Huh?
No,
she's nowhere near phlegmatic. No. She is so melancholy. And
excuse me.
I was talking to another group outside the church explaining this, and this is how I explain my children. Juliana is a choleric and is the one who says we need to take the hill. Emily is the melancholy who organizes the route by which we will take the hill. And Sarah Grace is the one who blogs about it. And he wants more people to be a part of taking the hill. So, and that because Sarah Grace is an influencer, which I still don't understand that career. And so anyway, but this is how I was going to finish it. He said some things about me tonight. I got one thing. There's one memory that about this that I know. And Ann, you're gonna remember this. There are two things would happen. Ronnie and I got into golf, big into golf, and I've always played golf great, but Ronnie got so excited about it that he started, and they lived on a 20-something acre farm type thing with a lake, and they mowed 7 acres at a time. She mowed 7 acres. She got that.
I did some.
That zero turn, man. She was awesome. But
don't get in her way.
Ronnie got so excited about playing golf that he started building a golf green in his front yard. And I went over and I said, Ronnie, what are you doing? You're a pediatrician. You're one of the most busiest people on the planet. You're building a golf green. And this was his comment. I want to get all my children involved and then all their friends, and we can all come and play golf in the front yard at the golf green. When I asked Ann, this is what she said. He's into golf now. How long after that did you start into horses?
It's not relevant.
He started buying horses and he put them out at the barn. And Ronnie's thought was, everybody's going to come ride horses. We're going to have our family over, and the kids are going to be there riding horses. I went to Ann. I said, Ann, how you doing? And this is her comment. He's into horses now. That sums up. I don't have to tell any more stories. I don't know. Ann will tell you that for so many years, I was so scared to death of Ann. I was scared to death of Ann. If she'd have said,
you're not the only one.
If she would have said, strip right now and walk across those hot coals, I would have been, all right, let me get my shoes off and go. But that's that melancholy nature that I so respect that I don't have in me. Oh. But I just want to say to you that you maybe would not be surprised at how over 30 years, how much I see in this in the church. I take it as a personal affront if someone criticizes an idea that I'm doing to try to bring people together and I'm big into collaboration. I'm a sanguine. I want our team to work together in collaborative covenant. I don't like having to be the hierarchy, and I never get in trouble for doing too little. I always get in trouble for doing too much. It's because I'm an apostle too. That's my spiritual gift, and so I love to start things. I have to have a good team of people, though, of melancholies who like to keep things going. And so just think about and I'm not going to pick on them tonight, but several of our key lay leaders are here. Think about what your personalities are. And think about how you react to one another, and then think about how we as a congregation react to each other. And there really is something to it. The reason I love this is this has been around for 27 centuries. Mm-hmm. The Enneagram, the Myers-Briggs, the Taylor-Johnson, those have all been in the last century. This is really at the foundation of all of that. So we'll let you know when the curriculum is finished. It'll be finished sometime early next year. We'll get this out. And, of course, I want you to, if you would like to be on the podcast subscription, there's a card. Were those passed out? There's a card that you can just fill out with your email, and you'll get a weekly update, a reminder. It's 15 minutes a week. They'll go out on Thursday mornings, and Ronnie and I will be doing that together, interviewing people from various places around the country. I don't understand this digital age. He doesn't understand it very well either, but we know people who do. We want to be able to help move forward in some things. Speaking of podcasts, where's Andrew Grissom? Andrew and William Merriman just started a podcast that is fantastic. It's called The Wandering Life. Wandering Years. Not all who wander are lost, is what he taught. Is there? So you need to check that out on the church website. Any other questions or comments? Oh, thank you, Linda. But I wouldn't expect anything less from you. Linda is a sweet sanguine too, so I think you are. All right, let's stand and we'll say our prayer. Also, some of you asked about the Andrew Thompson's book. He won the Dunham Prize in 2020, and you weren't able to get it at the banquet. We have some copies out here at the table of Means of Grace, so you can pick those up if you'd like to get a copy of Andrew Thompson's book. Gracious Father, we thank you so much for tonight and for the start of this conversation. We thank you for how important it is for us to be connected to one another, and that in the ways that you've knit us together, Lord, those connections come with different temperaments and personalities. You've wired us together in very specific ways, and that, Father, the brokenness of this world is what has led us to find ways to hide and to put to shame and to be full of shame, to be undone and unsettled. And so, Lord, the first question you ask us is, where are you? And so, Lord, we do believe that being able to locate us in terms of how you've knit us together will help us then to live that out faithfully as we go forward. And so we pray, Father, that even if it's just one person here tonight that needed to hear this, to give them wisdom and direction, whether with their marriage or with their children or with their friends or with their parents, that, Lord, that you were speaking directly to them and in them. I do thank you for Ronnie. I thank you for what he's meant to me for 3.5 decades, for the importance of his life as we have done life together in so many ways, for the imprint of his family's life on my family's life, and for all that you have in store. We ask this in Jesus, and everyone agreed and said,
Amen.
Amen. God bless you. Green story came to my mind too, because you